right, everyone, we're going to get started. I'd like to welcome you today. My name is Tabitha Scoble. I'm the Assistant Director here at CCHS. And I've got a few things to tell you before we introduce our speaker. On your tables, and if you need one, there are some over by the desk, there are surveys. If you can tell us where you heard about the program, if you have any ideas for other speakers, that's always a good thing. That's how we manage to keep our schedule full. Also, this year we have a goal of getting 60 new members, so if you are not currently a member and would like to become one, there are membership forms on the tables. And our members do get free research at the Historical Society. This is our research center, and also free tours of the Suggett House Museum, which is at the other end of the building. I'd like to introduce Mary Dexter. She came to our rescue because we had a cancellation for a speaker. Richard Palmer was going to do cobblestone buildings, and we are sad he couldn't come, but we were very grateful for Mary because she knows more about cemeteries and headstones than anybody I have ever met in my life. She's a great local historian and a history enthusiast and cemetery enthusiast. So we'd like to welcome Mary, and thank you for bailing us out, Mary.
Going to get a lot of pictures today. Not going to do much talking. I say that.
Can we ask questions and then you have to talk?
If you see something right there that I, didn't address, speak up, and or later if you remember. But like I said, there's going to be quite a few pictures. There will be some things that I will talk about and then move to 3 or 4 examples. But let's see if we can do this. I have thousands of pictures on my computer, so we've narrowed it down to about that many. Okay. I'm a member of the Association for Gravestone Studies. Yes, Virginia, there is such an organization. And as a member of that group, I had come to an interest in gravestone carvers, particularly before 1830 in Cortland, Shenango County. And that was the original focus of my research, and doing the research opened up all kinds of avenues. So it's basically research on gravestone carvers, and then we will just blossom into, when you walk into it, for that reason you stop. You see a graveyard, you pull up, you stop, you wonder what's it. Just marvelous little things pop out. So let's go along here and see how we can move this along. First of all, let me tell you, a gravestone has these parts. The tympanum is the top. What's in the tympanum and other places on the stone is iconography, or the picture. These are finials. If they appear, they aren't always on every gravestone. The inscription is the main part of the stone telling us who died. Sometimes they tell us why. I found one yesterday, of consumption. And borders, and below sometimes there's an epitaph. This particular Latin word, aetatis, they taught us, is Latin for of the age, or years of age. And all our gravestone carvers around in this area just use this part of it, AE or AET. So that's what that means, the age of the person who is deceased. Every gravestone carver has inscriptions and iconography that are only his. And I do say his. It's only recently that women have started to carve gravestones. So all the ones we're talking about are men who carve these gravestones. And each one of them, their lettering style tells me who they are, because their inscription and their carving is as different as my handwriting is from your handwriting. For instance, what we were just looking at, then we have common man's lettering, how different it is, and the certain lettering that you look for on any given stone to help identify him. He wasn't a great letter carver. His designs, and we'll look at a few of them later, are very interesting, but his lettering may be an example of his handwriting. My interest in gravestone carvers started in 1975. I was out doing a re-inventory of burial grounds in Cortland County, said to be just under 150. I spent 2 years doing that, but while I was in 1975 in the Texas Valley Cemetery, I looked down, and this stone is only about as high as my knee. It's a very, very small stone. But the noon sun was overhead, and it lit up the stone, and I saw this heart, which is pretty unusual for this area. And then the "Here Lies," which is really a New England form, not used in this area very often. And that got my attention in 1975, and I spent 23 years trying to identify who this carver was. Stones are small. He uses "Here Lies." He has interesting different tympanums. You'll notice that this date on this stone is 1819, which is just 10 years after the county was formed. The AET at the base, and the 2 vertical coffins, which I found very unusual for this area. So we called this carver Coffin Man for 23 years. And then in 1998, I found a stone in Coventryville Cemetery, for a man who died in 1817. And I took that information to Norwich, to the Shenango County Courthouse, and pulled a probate for Simon Jones. And in that file was this receipt for a pair of gravestones by J.W. Stewart. I now know, and now knew then, on that day, that this was the name of the carver who I called Coffin Man for 23 years. You'll notice the payment for the stone is, and it comes in pairs. It was a pair of gravestones. That means the headstone and the footstone form a pair. I was aware, because of my involvement with the Association for Gravestone Studies, that there was a carver in Claremont, New Hampshire by the name of Jonas Stewart. And so within a short period of time, I went to Claremont, New Hampshire, and in the proprietor's records, I found this family grouping for Jonas Stewart and his wife, Mary Grimes. He had these children. This one right here apparently died, because down here, the name appears again. And this is Jonas Stewart II, not Junior. This would have been Junior. This is Jonas Stewart II. He's our coffin man. His brother, James, carved, and his father carved for 50 years out of Claremont, New Hampshire. This is what his father's earliest work looks like. This is in Walpole, New Hampshire. He progressed into other forms here, then later from willow. But what you'll notice, the 3 carvers named Stewart have in common, the only thing they have in common, is the eye treatment. The multiple line around the eyes, which I look at and see as a mask, so I called it a masked eye. And it's the only thing all 3 of Mr. Stewart and his 2 sons used that are the same. This is the other son. This is James Grimes Stewart. You'll notice that the mask eye, looking at it from portrait view, looks a little like a fish, but it still is the same mask eye form. He did a lot of things. James was very talented and did many different forms on the tops of his gravestones, more than his father did. As closer we get to 1800, the fewer faces show up and we end up with these forms. I'm always fascinated when I see James put that coffin on. it's standing on a deer. Look very closely at the legs. They have little knobs at the knees. The closer you get to the stone, you can see the knobs at the knees. So in the early decade, first decade of 1800 to 1810, more and more carvers were moving north out of Massachusetts into the area because there were more people living up in Vermont, New Hampshire area. And more carvers came, and so business was spread more thinly, and our carver, Jonas W. Stewart II, our coffin man, came southwest out of Claremont, New Hampshire, and down into south central New York, and worked out of Coventryville. I mean, there's a lot of information as to how that worked and how I got there, but we have so much to talk about today, so I'll just say that he landed in Coventryville, and one of the come-ons may have been the fact that there's a sandstone quarry a quarter of a mile outside of Coventryville. And as you can see, he put out a territory. He probably arrived around 1810 or 11, and he worked until 1822, and he's working between Ithaca and Cooperstown and Cortland up here and down into Pennsylvania. And if you can imagine, in that time period, traveling was very hard, very early turnpikes. Now, I'm just going to show you some images here. These are Coffin Man, Stewart II Coffin Man images in Vermont and New Hampshire. And kind of remember these because I'm going to show you these images here, locally.
Will there be a test afterwards? An exam, pass it, we can.
That's a rising sun. Yeah, some say that that's a rising sun. Even the face in this coffin on this small gravestone is only as big around as my thumbnail, and it's still got the eye face and the nose. Here's the area that's covered from, as I said, Cooperstown, Otselic, way up into Kings Ferry and Ithaca, way down south from Binghamton into Athens, Pennsylvania, and farther down over into Hartford, Pennsylvania. A lot of territory being covered. Now here are the forms that we see here locally. This is, you remember seeing that again, it was in Vermont. This is in Ithaca, and it's again the coffin form. There's the woman with the hair tied up in the back and the kind of fisheye masked face. These are, I drew a blank. There's a name for this and I can't remember what it is.
Walking.
No, I can't think of it right off. Winged effigy. Sorry, it's a winged effigy. Again, we have a rising sun as opposed to a setting sun, but it looks pretty much like Kilroy, and that's only 50 years before Kilroy showed up
But he didn't sign them.
in the shipyards.
No.
But he didn't sign them or anything.
No, he didn't. J.W. Stewart did not sign any gravestones.
So how do you distinguish between a setting sun and a rising sun?
He doesn't do any of the setting suns, and they would just be the face without any
Oh,
radiation around him. Again, a winged effigy. Very much like those faces we saw in Vermont and New Hampshire that Jonas Stewart II did, and his brother James did these faces also. But our carver, Coffin Man, did a lot in this area because he came in after 1810. We're Ern Willow, although he does his forms abstractly rather than the urn that you see most of the time. All of his are abstract, and no two are alike. And I've got a 225 stone inventory. Stewart in Coventryville had 2 apprentices. This one is one I named Open Urn because the first 5 stones that I saw had no decoration in the urn and was open, and I thought, well, that's easy, we'll just call him Open Urn Man. Well, farther I went, it was harder and harder to find open urns. He was filling them in with some wonderful designs. Now this carver carved very large stones. His stones average this height, and some of them are as tall as I am. I also can't find his quarry. It is a marvelous stone that could be finished off almost as smooth as glass. And they got, well, I'll speak to that in a minute. Down in Pennsylvania, this stone is laying like that, so I'm laying on my back taking a picture at the 2 faces that are there. You see that they all touch, whether they have just a handful or 2, but they all touch back to that image, the mask eye face from New Hampshire. Open Urn liked to put flowers at the bottom of his gravestones, and many of them have these vines and flower forms. And occasionally I still would find, as in this one down in Pennsylvania, it's pretty much an open urn, letting the tree drape through it. This represents a tomb. When you think of urn and willow, this is not your average willow, but a marvelous rendition of a willow form from his way of seeing things. He did birds. This one's down in Pennsylvania. He did 4 on 4 different stones over the period of time that he carved. This is a rooster. The rooster form is that a crowing for the life having departed, and you put a rooster on the top. It's very rare. This is the only rooster I have in the collection. I have a couple of other birds, but they would just not be considered roosters. There's a crowing to this. This is a long way from open urn. This is an inscription and the tympanum. This is, we were dumbfounded when we found this down in Pennsylvania at the Laceyville Cemetery. This is the wife of Isaac Lacey. But, so open urn had many forms. Then we step to the other apprentice. I call him Eclectic Man. Eclectic because his gravestones had so many different forms on them. The most often is the urn that you see here. His I-N, is usually either has lines around it or flecking around it to make it stand out. He's a busy carver. He doesn't like to leave much space open on his carving. At the very top of this it says, a memento mori, which is Latin for remember death. This gentleman drowned. That's in the inscription. He was 21 years old and drowned. This is at Upper Lisle, so he must have drowned probably, my guess is, in the Tioughnioga River, maybe in the spring with high water. It's hard to say. This stone is way back in the woods. This is a fair walk to get to this stone, and it's almost its height is almost the same as its width. This is a very large stone. It's a little busy to see. Like I said, Eclectic Man was pretty busy with his gravestones. But you'll see here a broken tree. And down here are 3 other standing trees. My guess is this is Hosea Curtis, deceased, and these represent his sons. He had 3 sons. Guess on my part whether or not his interpretation shows up on the gravestone. We need to repair this stone. It's broken in 3 parts. We've put it aside and have contacted people who do conservation and preservation work over in Oxford, New York, and we're going to see if we can get this stone put back together. Captain Shadrach Terry captained a ship on Long Island Sound, and he's part of Washington, General Washington's spy ring. General Washington had spies in the area of in and around New York, so he could keep track of what the British were doing. And this spy ring involved moving around on Long Island and then crossing by ship over onto Connecticut to get on the northern end of New York. And Shadrach Terry sailed a ship, was among those part of that spy ring. He's buried on a hillside. I'll tell you right where this is. He's on a hillside between Route 11 and Route 81. He also did birds, obviously. Here's another one with a sun and moon image in the top. The spinning thing means it is an eternity symbol. The spinner is. Birds on flowers. This is a rubbing done on newspaper print by Ruth Cummins, Dr. Cummins' wife. I was here in the Historical Society showing some of my other Eclectic Man work to Shirley Heppel, who used to work here at the library. And Ruth was here in the building and came over and looked down at what I had in front of me. And she goes, "I've got a rubbing by that carver." She went out in her car and in the trunk, brought this in. This is my Eclectic Man. And of course, at the time, she wrote on it was at Venice Center. And I hadn't gone that far west yet. I was very surprised. So this opened up a whole area between here and Venice Center over into Cayuga and Tompkins County. But when I went to Venice Center, the stone wasn't there. There were 2 other stones by this carver, but this stone wasn't there. And probably, it was a long time. Could have been 5, 6 years out driving over in that area. Came around the corner onto Stewart's Corners, and there was a cemetery there. So we got out and we walked into the Venice Rural Cemetery, which is up on the hill above Venice Center. And when we walked all the way to the back, here was the stone that she had rubbed. That coloring is not on the stone. I did it with the computer. I would never color something on a gravestone. Nor would I put chalk or whipped cream or a flour. People are using lots of things to enhance something, and I'm going to show you at the end how to enhance a gravestone like that. But this is a sad story. This stone was there in 2009. It was broken, and I placed the broken 7 pieces that had come off the front under the back of the stone. The backing on it was tilted, and I laid them down under here. And I was over there this year. Everything's gone. The whole stone is gone from the cemetery. I've asked and talked to people And I can't find anybody that has, or saying that they have any knowledge of what happened to the stone. I would like to think that they took it to have it repaired. It could have easily been put back on the face, but nobody's owning up to it. Eclectic Man used the little disc faces with the masked eye. Gravestones have a habit of moving. Not just the angel that we talked about a few minutes ago, but every once in a while a stone turns up, has moved somewhere, or it's moved to where I am and it didn't seem to belong there. This stone here with no top was found behind a house on Greenbush Street, and it now lives in the basement of the Cortland County Historical Society. It's an Eclectic Man stone. Probably it was standing in what was the early Cortland Cemetery, which is now Courthouse Park. And when they dug things up and moved the graves and things to Cortland Rural in the 1850s, there were still pieces that say were down at the time and nobody found them. And then when they went digging for the foundation for the Cortland Normal School, they took fill from the area and put it over into Randall Flats, which later became Cedar, Greenbush, Huntington Street, and so that's when this turned up. If you go down in the woods today, you don't have to go alone, but you find some of the most interesting stones. It's all by itself, sitting quite a ways back, and I had a map of it, but the property owner had to take me out there. I could not find it from the way the map was going. And this is a very recent find for Eclectic Man. It's out there in the woods, and it overlooks, this is Phineas Bennett, who died in 1824, and he ran the mill, which is just, if you stand at his stone and look down over the embankment down onto Lock Creek is where his mill was. His stone has this Masonic emblem at the bottom. There is an interesting relationship by this carver to a Masonic member. I think one of the benefits for Freemasonry was to bury the member or to have a stone raised for him. And so quite a few of these, I won't say quite a few, probably less than 20 have this at the base, but I think there was a connection between this carver, Eclectic Man, and the Masons in the area from Tompkins County and Cayuga County. This is back at Venice Rural Cemetery. This is another stone. This is a tomb in the center, and it's a mother mourning her two children, and they're not young. They're both just under 20 years old. And but I want to show you some renditions of this tympanum. This metalwork is fairly new, and you don't want to use this, you don't want to rub with paper or metal or anything on a stone that is not totally secure. If it's flaking or delaminating, cracking, you don't put any pressure on it from rubbing. Or this is a metal. It's several grades heavier than your regular aluminum foil. But you take it and do a rubbing with a very soft cloth to see, so you can remember where things are. And as you get deeper into it, you do from the inside out so that the metal goes sideways. And then this particular view of this tympanum was done by a friend I have who lives down in Kirkville. She works in glass. She crushes glass in different colors and then did this. This is the form. There it is, and coming up from that, and here it is in glass. It's beautiful with light behind it. You're out in the woods. We're back in the woods. And we look down, and there's maybe a 12 inches by 12 inches of stone, flat, really flat, looking up at you through the 2 or 3 inch deep detritus that's covering everything in the cemetery. So my niece Kate and Pat Davis started pulling it back away from the stone. It was a very large stone by an eclectic man. Never would have known it was down there or seen it. It hadn't been picked up. And 3 of his stones were under, they'd been down so long they had, leaf litter on top of it. There are 5 by eclectic man in this cemetery, not too far from Locke. It's in the town of Locke, and he may have lived there, but we're not sure how to. I'm going to be looking at probate for the men. And one of the footstones for the gravestones you were looking at even the footstone had a little trumpeting angel on it. I mean, there's just things that you have to be there for a while, and you really have to be down on your hands and knees sometime poking around and to find some interesting. All right, this is another one of Cortland County's carvers, and we're getting more and more of his inventory now because he's very special to a few friends of mine who are moving around. This is Common Man, and the Common Man is many of this man's stones show the comma on the interior. It's a word separator. It's not punctuation. It's used as a word separation. And that's very rare. It was used in the late 1600s. There are very few carvers that have anything like it. This man, as we saw earlier, his lettering is not great, but his carving of images, his iconography is stunning, especially when it's rubbed. He's the only carver in the area who does finials, carves finials. And it's hard to do with sandstone because of the way it's put together in layers. But here, he used another form of punctuation, a colon. Instead of the comma, he has the colon. And that's how he did the finials. You only see the finials if you have a rubbing. You see them here, but they're not carved through. He only carved it partway through so that you just see them in a representation on against paper, like that. This is large. This is a big gravestone over in Peruville. It was leaning pretty far over and going to be down, but we found something at the base over here. This man, I don't know whether this is the gravestone is for a woman, and I don't know whether this is her representation of her husband, whether the carver just felt like doing something different that day. Again, the commas on the interior of the inscription, and I don't have a clue as to who this man is. That was, at one time, was the whole inventory I had of them, and now we probably have 45 stones.
I have a question. When you say inventory, do you mean the rubbings or pictures, or like you keep saying I have all these, like you don't have the actual gravestones?
Excuse me. Can you hand me those? Yeah. Every time I engaged a gravestone, I filled out a form. So I have a card form for every gravestone that fits within the parameters of my research. And from this, I go to I haven't done this, I'm way behind. From there, I took from there and went into doing keeping an inventory. And it can be done by location, by carver's name, by All of the information is here on these forms.
Did you create that?
Just,
Brilliant.
you know, you're looking at it, you create a form when you're
Yeah.
looking at something so that you have everything's there, the name, who I think the carver is, a description, how good or how bad it is, whether it's facing east or west.
Condition,
Yeah.
excellent.
So you drew it versus taking a picture?
No, I have pictures.
Pictures as well?
Yeah, I have pictures,
Uh-huh.
especially but you can't always get them. I don't take pictures, I don't display pictures that aren't good, that you can read. You've been able to read and to see and view all of what I've done. And there are times, because you're in the woods, because there's the leaf cover, because for any number of
You
reasons.
can't get a good picture.
Right, can't get a good picture, so sometimes the rubbing is sufficient, and I take a picture of the rubbing, which I showed here. This is Sunburst Man. This is this gentleman carved a handful of stones up in Keeney Settlement. They're at the top of the hill if you feel like walking. They're really neat to look at. Asa Joyner was a carver in Virgil. He signed many stones. He carved in Cortland County, and there are stones in every single county attached to Cortland County. He got around. Now, this ad is by David H. Manrose in a local paper to say he was carving gravestones, but he never signed any. This beautiful stone is by Joseph L. Crandall of Norwich. He signs, yes, Mary Kimberly is related to Joseph L. Crandall.
I have another question. And when you say they sign them, where is there a particular place on the tombstone that they sign?
Usually on the lower right, but one of his stones in Cincinnatus has in the urn, J.C. It can be other places, and he's mainly out of Shenango County, and you'll find him along the east edge of Cortland County, and this is in Cincinnatus, and this is, one day I was there and took the picture, and then the next time I went back, got a problem here. This is lawnmower damage. A wheel from a lawnmower could take the whole thing right off if it's leaned on hard enough. They really have to be careful, and if you're ever around and feel that you have anything to input, you know, ask them. Better that the grass should grow around the edges of it than they hit it and try to cut it down. There are metal gravestone markers.
Who's that? Morrisville?
You'll find them around, there's some in DeRuyter, that's the closest one. These are in Morrisville, but there are a couple in DeRuyter. In the old DeRuyter cemetery, not the new one.
Is that the zinc ones, Mary?
I'm sorry?
Zinc?
What kind
No,
of
except
metal?
This is iron.
Okay.
This is cast iron,
Got it.
yeah. Cast iron form, usually put back to back, sometime poured into a mold. I think there's some over in Guilford too, because I think that's where some of them were made, in Guilford.
There's some in Bordino and some in Georgetown, early metal.
Here's another one of my glass representations. This man died when he was 33 years old by a strike of lightning.
Wow.
So the lightning in the tympanum shows, this is great iconography, you know, it shows the going down into the hourglass of life, and you can see he's less than half his years old,
Wow.
so he's 33. His name was Boughton, and he died, I think, in 1837. The stone says he was killed by lightning, and that he left a wife and young daughter. Sometimes you just have to find a black cat and send it. If you're in enough cemeteries, sooner or later you come up with a black cat. And I wish I could show you the deer. I don't know, you'd think if I put into the computer DEER, the picture would show up. So obviously I named it something else because I can't find it, but I was right down on the ground getting lined up, had the mirror going over here and taking a picture, and I thought, had the feeling something, and I turned my head like this. There was a deer standing right there looking at me, and I swung the camera around. When I did this, I clicked and it was gone like a shot. And I can't find rabbits, rabbits, chipmunks, a few snakes. I'm afraid of snakes. They just ruin my day. Then if you're out in old graveyards, you have to be a little careful. This day I was not careful. I drove up onto this grass, which has a lot of springs under it, and the whole front end of my front wheel drive dropped right down onto the axle. So there was no backing up, getting out of here. So I went across the street and I engaged the young woman in the like DPW works across the street. This is the old lock cemetery. And we got on the phone, and of course you get this lovely young girl in the Philippines, and I'm trying to describe to her where I am. You know, I'm saying lock, no, look, no. And so we had quite a conversation to get over there. We finally got CNY. He knew where I was, and he came and pulled us out. That was the first time. The second time was on Easter Sunday down in Pennsylvania. We'd done what we were going to do. I looked in this mirror to see what was down here, and I backed up and backed right onto the side of the embankment over here, and I was off again. I couldn't move it one way or the other. So that was the second time. So a little later in the summer, Bologna Springs is down in South Shenango County. So what do you think I did with this wooden bridge with my car? Did I or did I not cross this bridge and go on up the road to find the cemetery in Bologna Springs? I did not. That was fairly deep, and there's a creek down here, and no, we're not going there today. Come to find out, cemetery's behind us, way out in the field. So I had overshot the cemetery as it was, but learned my lesson. We don't do that anymore. Now these are just quick little pictures of them. This is a covering for a blacksmith's wife.
Wow.
Isn't that neat? No. It's down in Willett. They lived there at the time, and he had a blacksmith shop down on the creek. Here are 7 children of the Campbell family. You find multiple tops to gravestones. This is the largest number I found, but I know that there are some that are more. A man, his 3 wives, and several of the children are all on a multiple headstone. This is where somebody just wanted really hard to help memorialize someone, did the best they could with what they had. That one's not too far from here. I don't know whether you can find it or not. It's in the Hamilton, New York, in the cemetery, toward the back. If you're in there, don't wander around on the hundreds of stones up front, but go to the back. This is Robards Felton, and he came out of Massachusetts. This is probably, I'm not sure, a Sewell carver. This is one of those white bronze metal markers. You see almost one, at least in every cemetery in the area, but this one has a full personage on the top. It was new to me. I've never seen one that big. This is our dear friend Gershom Bartlett. I love his stones. He's all over in Vermont along the Connecticut River. This I found last year just over in Lakeside Cemetery, Ithaca. This is what's written on the card. From your loving brother, Danny. This is a true New England grave top. A lot of detail there.
Wow.
A real anatomy lesson. Wonderful fences of metal and stone. And This is in North Carolina. This is soapstone and you can carve through it. So you get these images. It's the only place that you can find them in Davidson County, North Carolina. Can anybody tell me what, this is the back of the gravestone. Can anybody tell me what the front is? What the front looks like?
Is it a Scotty?
Oh, just one more.
Ah!
Rockingham.
Electric hairdo here. A wife and a daughter.
Bottle top.
I think these two babes are wrapped in quilts. I think that's these are a quilt form here.
Rockingham, Massachusetts.
This is the trick with the mirror. If you're going out and the front of your gravestone is in shade or dark, go back as far as you have to pick up full sun. Put it off a mirror. Throw it down here on the front of the gravestone.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you've got a standard for your mirror.
Yes, I do. I met a gentleman in Vermont when I was working, and he was a woodworker, and he had one of these, and I asked him to build me one, so I slide it down and stand so I can be there alone. I used to have trouble because you had the mirror. I broke a lot of mirrors trying to hold the mirror like this and take a picture like that. There it is again, just run it off and onto the front of the gravestone. That's my thesis at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And it was dedicated to the carvers here in Cortland County. Thank you very much for your patience and your interest. The Association for Gravestone Studies has great conferences. You can learn a lot, all different aspects, whatever your interest is. And
Where is it located out of?
they're now in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Okay.
But online, you can, Association for Gravestone Studies will bring that up for you
They're meeting in June this year.
in Georgia.
Georgia?
Georgia. Yeah. Then every other year they're in New England somewhere, and the wonderful New England gravestones that you have to look at, and interesting carvers. But
Membership used to be New England, and now it's exciting because we've had people come. I sat and listened to somebody talk about cemetery,
in France,
France, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, China. And it's not just the stones, there's people who do epitaphs, there's people, I don't know, what is another subject matter that people are into?
one is,
They do all the stones that some hand is doing this, or stones that have birds on them, or some people just pick out subject matter. How people grieve, how they embellish their personal person in the cemetery.
take a look at Ann's t-shirt.
Yes. I
You
told
get it?
you I was what?
I told you I was.
Every year they print one, and
I can
this,
read that
this,
two different ways.
this trumpeting angel was on a monument, and the girl that is in charge of doing every year,
Chose out.
every year they sell t-shirts, this fundraiser sort of thing.
Thank you very much for your interest.
Yes.
Do you have anybody that you know of that's doing copies of these or similar things now? You can do them by laser, can't ya?
Yeah, I know they can, and I don't know who's doing those. A long time ago,
I'm sure.
before they knew what, they had a pink putty-like substance that somebody developed.
Uh-huh.
And they put, and this was for the tympanums or very small stones, and they put an agent that would allow you to put that on and pull it off. So I don't know whether it was wax on the stone or what exactly was on it. And they pressed this putty-like stuff onto the stone and let it set, and then pulled it off and had the reverse. And they made stone or made plaster forms and took them to AGS conferences, and you could rub one, and have it there and have it for yourself.
So you use the metal though, the,
I've used the metal lately,
Oil.
yeah, and it's only that wide, so the stone has to be fairly small, and like I said, it has to be very secure.
a lot of cemeteries don't permit anything like that.
That's right.
There are
If
official
the-
ones.
If the cemetery says, if the gate says, no rubbing or no entrance without permission, like Kilowog, you would think, oh, Kilowog, New York, there's an old cemetery, you just drive over there and drive to it. They got a thing across there, and a little sign that says, you have to get a key to unlock the gate from Pendle's store down in Kilowog, and the hours that you can go and get it. So I had to go 3 times. The stone over there on the wall that I rubbed a couple of weeks ago by Opener and Man was in that cemetery. The first time I went, I didn't know what it looked like, and I didn't take anything with me. It's a long walk. So I went the next week. I took paper and things with me, and by the time I got it cleaned off and ready to go, it started to rain. Pulled it up, walked all the way back to the car. Third time was a charm, and that's the rubbing of the face of the stone, and it's the most interesting, detailed stone that I have ever come across. Did all of you read it? Ira Cook, who departed this life on Wednesday, the 20th of December, 1820, 10 minutes before 11 p.m., after an illness of 13 days inclusive, age 21 years, 8 months, and 28 days.
Wow.
What's the name?
Who was
Ira
it?
Cook.
Ira Cook.
Ira Cook. And you find the Cook family still down in
And
there.
how did you do that? You did that with the,
It's laying down, face up.
uh-huh.
And at my age, it's getting harder and harder to be down on the ground.
Well, I understand that. Getting down is easy, getting up is the hard part. but-
Yeah, that's right.
But you use that heavy foil type stuff to do
No,
that?
this is hemp. This is a hemp-based paper. You can't get it anymore. It's almost like
Almost
a bed sheet. Yeah, almost
Yeah.
like a cloth. It's hemp-based, and there was there was a time when the United States was, excuse me, putting a barrier up, a trade barrier up against hemp from South America, and this whole thing came apart. Now you can buy rice paper at art stores. Rice paper will do it. You can even get leftover newspaper print. Gives you a lot of latitude, and it's a special wax. You don't want to use a soft wax, because if the stone is warm at all, it just is gooey. It's a hard English rubbing wax. I didn't bring any with me today. That is still available and you can find people who do that through the Association for Gravestone Studies. There are people who advertise on their website.
So who's the carver?
Opener and Man. And the urn at the top of the stone is open. There's no decoration in it. Yep, you're right. It's open, and it's broken off at the bottom and has been run over. And so the only pieces of the epitaph say, "Tears fell." So I got that far down, but the rest of it is broken, pretty badly too.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Mary, do you want to talk about a field trip possibility?
If you do it, I want to go.
How would you clean the stone? You said don't use,
Oh, yes, I did not mention it. There's a product out called D2.
D2.
Yep, and it's expensive. It's $40 a gallon, but we mix it half with water, depending on how badly the stone needs to be cleaned. And there are some spores that get into, especially, well, a ton of it gets into marble. Marble's so very porous. People, when they first started with it, thought it was harder than sandstone or local stone, but it wasn't. It's very porous. So you use D2 and it's a spray on and let it set on there, and then use a soft bristle brush, not a hard one, a soft bristle brush, toothbrushes, and start going and working it down, and then put water in it.
How
Never use
long
anything but water to
to rinse off the,
rinse it, maybe start over again if you need to, and
Uh-huh.
put it on.
how long does that improvement of cleaning it last?
Depends on what's happened with the trees. The trees around and in cemeteries are part of what creates the problem for the stones underneath it. Although some wide open marble filled cemeteries are totally black. I was very, very disappointed yesterday to stop in the Sherburne Cemetery, which I remembered from 20 years ago, had wonderful, very white stones. That's the memory of, I have it in my mind. You can't even read most of them. There's a lot of stones in there, but there's a lot of evergreens and things like that. Put moss and lichens. The big blue, the big blue blooms that you see on the front, they're easy. Put a little water on them, take a credit card from your wallet and just get under it and scrape it right off. The big blue blooms come right off. It's the yellow and the red stuff that on them that creates.
Yeah, when we were down in Connecticut and down there toward the coast, a lot of the stones had this red on them.
Just depends on the environment and what we've done.
What stones, what is the stone that they use? Some of the stones are extremely white. What stone is that? Is that
I think
marble?
it's
Is
marble
that-
that somebody's put bleach on. Don't ever put bleach on a marble gravestone. You're just hastening its destruction.
Well, it's just every once in a while.
Yeah, I do too.
You
You see
know, all of a
real
sudden,
white.
there's one that just stands out among the rest of them.
Somebody's put either ammonia or bleach on it.
Oh.
Yeah, they don't last that long. They were very white when they were made in 1840, 50, 60, what have you, but they very early started to break down. It's the nature of marble to do
Well,
that.
I've noticed the newer stones, the ones in the pink stone of some kind, it's a pink color.
Everything now is granite.
Well, okay, then
And
the
it's all
pink
colors.
granite that they make, whatever color it is, that attracts leaching terrible. I mean, and these are recent stones and they're just covered with leaching, worse than the older ones.
I don't know.
So I decided for myself, I'm not getting a pink
Yeah,
stone.
yeah. Yeah, and if anybody needs or wants somebody who will restore a stone or do some cleaning or what have you, there are two women that I know who are in business, one in Oxford and one over in Delhi who do it, and I have business cards for them. I'll drop a few of them off here and
Okay.
leave them for people who want to get an estimate from them. They do very good work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.